Imagine a story so powerful that even 3 decades later, fans across the world are still asking the same question: what happened next? Pretty Woman wasn't just a movie, it was a cultural phenomenon that defined romance for an entire generation. And now, in 2025, the dream returns with Pretty Woman 2, Second Chances. But before we step into this brand new chapter, let's rewind to where it all began, back in 1990. When the world first met Vivian Ward and Edward Lewis, audiences were swept into a love story that no one saw coming. Vivian, played by a young Julia Roberts, wasn't your traditional leading lady. She was bold, full of charm, and unapologetically herself. Then came Edward, the wealthy businessman portrayed by Gere, whose life was defined by rules, deals, and polished appearances. Together, they broke through stereotypes and created a romance that felt both modern and timeless. Pretty Woman wasn't just another romantic comedy. It became one of the most iconic films of its era, grossing over $460 million worldwide. More than the numbers, though, it became a story people carried in their hearts. Who can forget Vivian's transformation scene, walking down Rodeo Drive with a new sense of pride, or Edward climbing the fire escape in the film's final moments, proving that fairy tales can come true in the most unexpected ways? Those images became etched in movie history, replayed again and again in pop culture references, TV homages, and countless parodies, but the magic of Pretty Woman wasn't only in its love story, it was in the performances. Julia Roberts, with her radiant smile and natural charisma, became America's sweetheart. That role didn't just launch her career into superstardom, it cemented her as one of the most beloved actresses of all time. Gere, already a star, found a defining role that showcased his ability to balance vulnerability with charm. Together, their chemistry was undeniable. You could feel every spark, every glance, every moment of hesitation and attraction. It's the kind of on-screen connection that directors and producers dream about but rarely capture. And let's not forget the soundtrack. Roy Orbison's "Oh, Pretty Woman" became more than just a song, it became an anthem for the film, instantly recognizable and forever tied to the story of Vivian and Edward. From romantic ballads to upbeat tracks, the music created a world that felt larger than life, yet close enough to touch. The film's success also shifted Hollywood itself. In the early 90s, romantic comedies often followed predictable patterns. But Pretty Woman showed that audiences wanted more. They wanted depth, humor, and stories where characters could grow, change, and surprise them. It paved the way for a new wave of rom-coms that dominated the decade. Yet none carried quite the same magic. What makes Pretty Woman unforgettable is how it blended fantasy with reality. It acknowledged the harsh truths of life struggles, differences, fears, but layered them with hope, charm, and the idea that love can rewrite even the most unlikely stories. Vivian wasn't a damsel in distress, and Edward wasn't a flawless prince. They were two flawed people who found something extraordinary in each other, and that's why the story lasted. That's why, decades later, people still wonder, what if? Over time, Pretty Woman became more than just a movie. It became a comfort film, a story people returned to when they needed joy, laughter, or simply to believe in love again. Generations have grown up watching Vivian's smile light up the screen and Edward's carefully guarded world slowly crumble in the face of genuine connection. Now, with the announcement of Pretty Woman 2, Second Chances, all that nostalgia comes rushing back. But before we dive into this new chapter, it's important to remember the weight of the legacy. Because the sequel doesn't just carry the name, it carries decades of love, memory, and anticipation. For years, fans thought Pretty Woman was a one-time fairy tale. Vivian and Edward got there happily ever after, and the curtain closed with Edward climbing the fire escape, flowers in hand, and Vivian smiling from above. But real life is rarely that simple. Love, no matter how magical, is also fragile. And now, more than 3 decades later, the sequel Pretty Woman 2, Second Chances, dares to ask a question few films ever return to. What happens after the fairy tale ends? The new story doesn't pretend that time stood still. Vivian and Edward have lived entire lives since we last saw them. They've made choices, faced struggles, and grown older with the world around them. This sequel doesn't just replay the same beats, it explores the reality of love years later, when second chances are rare and more precious than ever. In the trailer, we see Vivian walking through a modern Los Angeles, no longer the uncertain young woman trying to figure out where she belongs. She's older, wiser, and more grounded, but there's still a spark in her eyes. She has built a life of her own, one defined not by who she was with, but by the choices she made when the spotlight faded. She isn't the same woman we met in 1990. She's more layered, carrying both the confidence of experience and the weight of time. Edward, too, has changed. He's still the sophisticated businessman audiences remember, but years of decisions, regrets, and loneliness show in his expression. He has everything money can buy, yet the trailer hints that something vital is missing. When he sees Vivian, again across a crowded room, or in a quiet moment of chance, there's a flicker of recognition that feels almost like destiny pulling them back together. Pretty Woman 2, Second Chances isn't about recreating the magic of youth. It's about rediscovering it in a different form. The tagline teased in the trailer captures the heart of the story. It's never too late to fall in love again. This isn't a tale of a woman transformed by a glamorous makeover or a man softened by unexpected romance. It's the story of two people who once changed each other's lives, and now must decide if they're willing to open their hearts. Again, after years apart, the trailer drops subtle clues about the challenges they face. There are glimpses of family dynamics, children, perhaps grown and with their own opinions about love. There are moments of conflict, suggesting that both Vivian and Edward built lives that don't neatly fit together anymore. And yet, the spark between them is undeniable. Fans of the original will recognize the teasing banter, the shared glances, and that electric tension that only Roberts and Gere can deliver, but there's also something deeper this time around. The trailer highlights the contrast between past and present. We see flashes of Rodeo Drive, once Vivian's playground, now transformed by time and new faces. We catch a glimpse of Edward's limo, that symbol of wealth and distance, now carrying the weight of memory rather than just luxury. These visual callbacks remind audiences of where the story began, while showing how much the world and the characters have changed. The title, Second Chances, isn't just a marketing trick, it's the emotional core of the film. It speaks to the universal desire to believe that it's never too late, that mistakes don't have to define us forever, and that love can surprise us when we least expect it. For anyone who watched Pretty Woman decades ago and has since lived through their own heartbreaks, triumphs, and regrets, this sequel isn't just a continuation, it's a reflection of their own journey. The excitement around this project isn't just about Julia Roberts and Richard Gere returning, though their reunion is a dream come true for fans. It's about the idea that Hollywood is finally giving us a love story that grows with its audience. Instead of pretending time didn't pass, Pretty Woman 2 embraces it, turning the passage of years into a story worth telling. In short, the sequel isn't trying to replace the magic of the original. It's expanding it, giving us a richer, more mature version of the story we already loved. The fairy tale didn't end, it just paused. And now, with Pretty Woman 2, Second Chances, we finally get to see what happens when Vivian and Edward face the most powerful truth of all. Sometimes, the greatest love stories begin the second time around. Asterisk. One of the biggest reasons Pretty Woman became an unforgettable classic was because of its cast. Without Julia Roberts and Richard Gere, the magic simply wouldn't have existed. And now, more than 30 years later, the sequel Pretty Woman 2, Second Chances, gives fans exactly what they've been dreaming about, the return of these two stars, together again, bringing Vivian and Edward back to life in a whole new way. Julia Roberts is once again stepping into the shoes of Vivian Ward, but this time, she's not the young woman trying to navigate a world that didn't always make space for her. She's a woman who has lived a full life, one with triumphs, mistakes, and lessons learned. The trailer suggests that Vivian's journey after Edward wasn't a perfect fairy tale. Instead, she had to figure out who she was when the fairy tale ended, and that makes her character richer, deeper, and more relatable than ever. Roberts, with her natural charisma and ability to balance warmth with strength, is perfectly suited for this older version of Vivian. She isn't just playing a role, she's embodying the evolution of a character we already love, making us believe in her story once again. Richard Gere's return as Edward Lewis is equally powerful. In the original film, Edward was the polished, wealthy businessman who seemed to have it all, yet deep down was searching for something real. In Second Chances, he is older, more reflective, and even more layered. The charm is still there, but there's a sense of vulnerability that comes from time passing and opportunities lost. Gere has always excelled at playing men who are both strong and sensitive, and here, his performance seems to carry a new weight, as if Edward himself has grown alongside the audience who first met him back in 1990. The chemistry between Gere and Roberts, undeniable, then still shines through in every glance teased in the trailer, but this sequel doesn't only rely on its original stars. The supporting cast adds fresh dimensions to the story. Though the studio has been secretive about revealing too much, the trailer hints at the introduction of younger characters who are closely tied to Vivian and Edward's lives. We see glimpses of family dinners, tense conversations, and moments where the next generation challenges the choices of the past. It's possible that one of these characters could be Vivian's child, or perhaps someone connected to Edward's world of business. These new additions bring an important layer. They remind the audience that life didn't freeze after the first movie, it moved forward, and new relationships, both joyful and complicated, have been formed along the way. There are also whispers of a rival or new love interest who complicates Vivian and Edward's reunion. The trailer shows brief flashes of another man speaking closely with Vivian, suggesting that Edward may not be the only person in her life anymore, whether this is a source of conflict, jealousy, or simply a reflection of her independence. It makes the story more compelling. After all, second chances in love aren't just about reliving the past, they're about choosing the future, and sometimes that means deciding between old feelings and new possibilities. Another highlight is the possibility of cameos or returns from characters in the first film. Fans are especially curious whether Kit, Vivian's best friend from the original movie, might make a brief return. Even if just for a small role, seeing familiar faces could tie the past and present together beautifully, giving fans that nostalgic thrill while also showing how much time has passed. The creative decision to balance old and new is what makes the cast of Pretty Woman 2 so exciting. Roberts and Gere bring the heart of the story, anchoring it with performances that remind us why we fell in love with Vivian and Edward in the first place. Meanwhile, the younger cast members bring energy and conflict, reflecting the modern world and forcing the main characters to grow in ways they never had to before. It's also worth noting that this sequel gives Roberts and Gere the rare chance to revisit roles that defined their careers. Hollywood doesn't often allow stars to come back to iconic characters decades later, and when it does happen, it carries a special kind of magic. Audiences aren't just watching Vivian and Edward, they're watching Julia Roberts and Richard Gere bring 30 years of their own growth, wisdom, and life experience into the story. That kind of authenticity can't be faked, and it's why the film has the potential to strike such a deep emotional chord. In the end, the cast of Pretty Woman 2, Second Chances, is more than just names on a poster. They represent the bridge between past and present, nostalgia and renewal. With Roberts and Gere leading the way and a supporting cast ready to add fresh perspectives, the sequel promises not just a reunion of characters, but a celebration of how stories and people can grow over time. For fans, seeing these actors together again is like rekindling a friendship you thought you'd lost. It's familiar, comforting, and yet thrillingly new all at once. Asterisk at its heart, Pretty Woman 2, Second Chances isn't just about revisiting a love story. It's about exploring the universal truths that come with age, change, and the passage of time. The themes in this sequel go far beyond a traditional romance. They speak to anyone who has ever looked back on their life and wondered, what if? What if I had chosen differently? What if I had one more chance to make things right? The strongest theme is, of course, second chances. In the original Pretty Woman, The story was about transformation, the idea that love can lift someone out of their struggles and change the direction of their life. Vivian found self-worth, Edward found vulnerability, and together they built something unexpected. But in Second Chances, the message shifts. It's no longer about finding love for the first time. It's about rediscovering it after years of separation, mistakes, and growth. The film asks, can two people who once shaped each other's destiny reconnect after a lifetime apart? Can love survive not just hardship, but time itself? Another theme that runs deeply through the trailer is the reality of aging. Unlike many Hollywood romances that ignore the passage of time, this film embraces it. Vivian and Edward aren't the wide-eyed dreamers they once were. They carry wrinkles, scars, and memories. And yet that makes their story even more powerful. Love isn't just for the young, it's for anyone brave enough to open their heart, no matter their age. By showing Roberts and Gere in these roles now, the film sends a strong message. Beauty, passion, and romance don't fade with time. They evolve. The theme of regret also pulses beneath the surface. In the trailer, Edward is shown looking out over a city skyline, his face heavy with unspoken thoughts. Vivian walks alone, passing places that once held meaning. These moments suggest that both characters are haunted by the choices they made years ago. Regret is something every audience member can understand, whether it's about relationships, careers, or missed opportunities. But the story doesn't dwell in regret, it uses it as a stepping stone to show how hope can still bloom, even after years of silence. Independence and identity play an important role too. In the first movie, much of Vivian's journey was about breaking free from the label society put on her and discovering her own worth. In the sequel, that theme evolves. She's no longer searching for who she is, she knows. But the challenge now is balancing that independence with the vulnerability that love requires. The story seems to highlight the delicate dance between being true to yourself and opening your heart to another person again. There's also a subtle but powerful theme of family and legacy. The trailer teases moments where Vivian and Edward are surrounded by younger characters, suggesting that their choices will ripple into the lives of others. Love is no longer just about two people, it's about the families, friendships, and bonds that have grown around them over the decades. Their second chance isn't just theirs, it affects everyone connected to them. This makes the stakes higher, the emotions deeper, and the decisions far more complex than before. Humor, of course, is still part of the emotional fabric. Pretty Woman became famous not just for romance but for witty banter and light-hearted moments that made the story joyful. The trailer for Second Chances sprinkles in similar beats Vivian's laugh, Edward's dry wit, and those small, playful exchanges that remind audiences why they fell in love with this couple in the first place. But the humor now has a different weight. It's not the carefree laughter of youth. It's the shared humor of people who have lived, lost, and still find reasons to smile. Ultimately, the emotional core of Pretty Woman 2, Second Chances, is about hope. Life rarely gives us do-overs. But this film offers the fantasy of what it might look like if we got one. It's about believing that no matter how much time has passed, no matter how many mistakes we've made, love can still find its way back to us. That's why this story resonates so strongly. It doesn't just cater to fans of the original. It speaks to anyone who has ever dreamed of reconnecting with something or someone they thought was lost forever, and perhaps that's what makes this sequel so bold. It's not trying to create a perfect fairy tale. It's trying to create a real one. One where love isn't about sweeping gestures alone, but about resilience, forgiveness, and the courage to open your heart when it would be easier to keep it closed. The emotional heartbeat of Second Chances reminds us that sometimes the greatest fairy tales aren't about starting over, they're about finding the strength to begin again, even after the story seems to have ended.